Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at This is Water, the commencement speech by David Foster Wallace. And we've got a whole bunch of different study guides and analyses that we're going to be diving deep into.
Right.
And, even if you're years past graduation, this stuff is really relevant.
Absolutely.
And super interesting. So
it's about being human more than it is about, being a graduate.
Exactly. So to jump right into it, Wallace starts off with this really interesting analogy about these two young fish.
Okay.
And they're swimming along, and they bump into this older fish.
Okay.
The older fish nods at them and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and one turns to the other and says, "What the hell is water?"
Oh, that's great.
It's so simple, right?
Yeah.
But it's so profound.
Yeah. I mean, it's like he's holding a mirror up to our own lives in a way, right?
Yeah.
Like we are often blind to the most obvious and foundational realities that shape our lives. And it's kind of like asking a fish to describe water.
Right.
They just exist in it.
Yeah.
So it begs the question, what is the water that you're swimming in right now?
Oh, totally. And what are those unquestioned realities that are shaping your life right now? And it gets even more interesting when we get into the concept of the default setting.
Right. This default setting, he describes it as our natural, automatic, self-centered mode of thinking.
Yeah.
It's kind of like our brain's autopilot. And, it's not inherently bad,
right?
But it can lead us down a path of frustration and, suffering if we're not aware of it.
Totally. And he uses these really relatable examples, like being stuck in traffic or going to the grocery store and everyone's in your way.
Right. It's like, why are all these people in my way? I'm the only one that matters.
Yeah. It's like, ugh, come on. It's that default setting.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
He suggests that by simply recognizing this default setting, let's say in that traffic jam, we can actually rewire our brains to respond differently.
Oh, wow.
So imagine instead of getting frustrated, you use that time to practice mindfulness or listen to a podcast. You're actually changing your brain's wiring by choosing a different response.
It's like choosing a different setting.
Totally.
It's not just being aware of the default setting, but realizing we have the power to actually choose a different setting.
Right.
But how much choice do we actually have? Is it possible that we're just tricking ourselves?
Right. That's a great question.
Into thinking we're choosing when really it's just our brains on autopilot again.
That leads us to one of Wallace's most crucial points.
Okay.
The power of choosing what to think about. So he tells this story about these two guys in a bar in Alaska.
Okay.
One's deeply religious, the other's a staunch atheist, and they're arguing about the existence of God.
Okay.
So the atheist shares this story about getting lost in a blizzard, praying for help, and being rescued by a group of Eskimos. So the religious guy's like, see, you must believe now. But the atheist insists, no, it was just coincidence. Those Eskimos happened to be passing by.
So it's the same event, but they're interpreting it.
Exactly.
Totally differently based on their
pre-existing beliefs.
Yeah, their own reality.
It's like we're creating our own realities.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he's getting at.
Okay.
We're constantly constructing meaning from our experiences. That meaning isn't inherently present in the event itself. It's a choice we make.
Okay.
Whether consciously or unconsciously.
It's not just about what happens to us, it's how we choose to interpret those events.
Right.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But this idea of choice isn't just some abstract philosophical concept.
Okay.
It has very real practical implications.
Okay.
In our daily lives. Remember that crowded supermarket?
Yeah.
Instead of seeing it as an inconvenience, you can choose to see it as a chance to practice patience.
Okay.
To observe, this fascinating tapestry of human behavior.
So it's not about denying our feelings, but choosing how we respond to them.
Right.
Yeah. And this reminds me of Wallace's repeated phrase, "This is water."
Yes.
Almost like a mantra to snap us out of that default setting.
He's calling for a kind of conscious awareness.
Okay.
This is water.
Yeah.
Is a reminder to pay attention.
Yeah.
To acknowledge the reality that we're swimming in. And what's fascinating here, according to neuroscience, this kind of mindful awareness can actually change our brain structure over time.
Wow.
Making us less reactive and more resilient.
It's not just a change in perspective, but a literal rewiring of our brains.
It's pretty profound.
Yeah. So what other seemingly fixed aspects of ourselves are actually malleable with this conscious effort?
Yeah. It's a really profound thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it leads us to another powerful concept,
Okay.
this idea that there is no such thing as atheism.
Ooh.
Now, this might sound jarring at first,
Yeah.
but Wallace isn't talking about belief in a specific deity. He's talking about the human tendency to worship something, to place ultimate value on something,
Okay.
whether that's money, success, beauty, or even our own intellect.
It's almost like saying we all have an inherent need to believe in something
Exactly.
bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
But the choice of what we worship can have some pretty big consequences.
Huge consequences.
Yeah.
And they're not always immediately apparent.
Right.
If you think about it, if you primarily worship material possessions, you might find yourself in this constant treadmill of acquisition and never feeling truly satisfied.
Yeah, you're never satisfied.
Or if your primary focus is on achieving a certain level of social status, then your sense of self-worth becomes totally dependent on external validation.
So it's like, what are we unconsciously worshiping in our own lives?
Exactly.
And are those choices actually serving us? I think we need a moment to let that sink in.
Yeah.
It's getting pretty deep.
It is.
So, okay, let's pick this back up with this idea of worship. Because I'm really curious about, like, the psychology of it all.
Yeah.
Like, why we gravitate towards certain things.
It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
See, our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Okay.
This is like deep in our evolutionary history.
Right.
This is what helped us to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But in our modern world, this ancient wiring can sometimes lead us astray.
Oh, so we end up, like, worshiping things
Yes.
that promise pleasure or relief from pain, even if they don't actually lead to fulfillment.
Exactly. Like take social media, for example.
Right. Okay.
It's designed to trigger those pleasure centers in our brains with likes, comments, and notifications.
Right.
And before we know it, we're spending hours scrolling through feeds,
Yeah.
seeking that next hit of dopamine,
Yeah.
even though it might be making us feel more anxious and disconnected in the long run.
Right. It's like that instant gratification, but the long-term effects are not so great.
It's a perfect example of how this worship can play out
Yeah.
in our modern world.
Yeah, totally. And it's so subtle,
It is.
but it has such a powerful grip
Yeah.
on our behavior.
It's crazy.
Mm.
And this leads us back to Wallace's point about the true value of education.
Okay.
It's not just about accumulating knowledge.
Right.
It's about learning to see these patterns,
Okay.
to understand the underlying forces that shape our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
So you're saying that a real education
Yeah,
can help us break free from these unconscious patterns.
that's exactly what he's suggesting.
Wow.
He argues that a true education is about learning to think critically,
Mm-hmm.
to question our assumptions,
Okay.
to consciously choose what we value.
Mhm.
It's about developing the mental tools to become the architects of our own lives,
Right.
rather than just passive consumers of whatever our culture throws at us.
That's a pretty empowering idea,
It is.
but also incredibly challenging. Like,
Yeah.
where do we even begin?
Well, he doesn't offer a step-by-step guide,
Right.
but he does provide some clues.
Okay.
He talks about the importance of paying attention,
Mhm.
of being present in the moment.
Okay.
This echoes a lot of what we know about mindfulness practices,
Right.
cultivating the ability to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment.
So instead of getting swept away by that urge to check your phone,
Yeah, exactly.
you pause,
Yes.
you notice the urge,
You notice it.
and you make a conscious choice
You make a choice.
about how to respond.
It's a subtle shift, but it can have profound effects over time.
Yeah. With practice, we can start to loosen the grip of those unconscious patterns
Absolutely.
and create more space for intentional choices.
Yeah. And this makes me think about Wallace's definition of freedom.
Okay.
He says, true freedom isn't about doing whatever we want.
Right.
It's about the ability to consciously choose how we respond to the world around us.
That's a really powerful distinction.
It is.
It's not about eliminating constraints.
Right.
Those are inherent to the human experience.
They are.
But it's about recognizing that even within those constraints, we still have a choice
We do.
in how we react, how we interpret, how we make meaning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So even in that frustrating traffic jam,
Yeah.
we have the freedom to choose how we experience that moment.
Right.
We can curse the universe and stew in our anger,
Yeah.
or we can choose to see it as an opportunity to practice patience,
Mm-hmm.
to listen to a podcast,
Yeah.
or to simply observe the world around us with a sense of curiosity.
It's not about denying the frustration or pretending it's not there. It's
Okay.
about acknowledging the feeling and then consciously choosing a different response.
It's powerful stuff.
It is. It's like we have this hidden superpower
Yeah.
to choose our own adventure.
I love that.
In any given moment.
It's true.
But like any superpower, it takes practice to master.
It does. And this practice, as Wallace suggests, is a lifelong endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
There's no finish line.
Right.
No point at which we achieve perfect awareness
Yeah.
and are immune to the pull of our default settings.
Right.
It's a constant dance
Yeah.
between awareness and unconsciousness, choice and reactivity.
Yeah. And even when we stumble, even when we find ourselves falling back into those old patterns,
Yeah.
it's not a failure.
It's not.
It's just feedback.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to learn to adjust and to keep practicing.
That's the beauty of it.
Mhm.
There's no judgment.
Right.
Just a continual process of waking up to the reality of our water,
Yeah.
to the choices we're making, and to the immense power we have to shape our own experience.
And that's why he keeps coming back to that simple but powerful phrase.
Yes.
This is water.
It's a reminder,
To be present. To pay attention, to keep choosing moment by moment.
moment by moment.
How we want to experience this life.
It's a call to conscious living,
Yeah.
to step out of the autopilot
Right.
and engage with the world in a more intentional, meaningful way.
And that's where his genius really shines.
It does.
He doesn't give us like a list of right choices or
Yeah.
like the correct way to think,
Right.
but he gives us the tools to figure it out for ourselves,
Exactly.
to define our own values, and to create a life that's genuinely aligned with who we are and what we want to be. I'm already starting to see the world a little differently, just thinking about all this.
That's the first step.
Yeah.
And as we continue to explore these ideas, we'll dive even deeper into the practical applications of Wallace's insights.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's one thing to understand these concepts intellectually,
Right.
but it's another thing entirely to actually live them.
Totally. So
Yeah.
how do we bridge that gap? How do we move from understanding to action to actually embodying these principles in our daily lives? It's like we've been given this incredible toolbox, but we're still figuring out how to use all the different instruments.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And like any new skill, it takes practice.
Mhm.
You don't just wake up one day and suddenly become a master of awareness and choice.
Right.
It's an ongoing process of trial and error,
Yeah.
of catching ourselves when we slip back into those default settings,
Mm-hmm.
and of gently guiding ourselves back to a place of conscious awareness.
So it's not about achieving some perfect state of
Right.
enlightenment, but more about developing a kind of mental muscle,
Exactly.
the ability to pause, to notice, and to choose.
Precisely. And Wallace gives us some powerful tools
Uh-huh.
to help develop this muscle.
Okay.
Remember that concept of worship we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
He challenges us to really examine what we're placing value on in our lives.
Right. Because those unconscious objects of worship can have a huge impact on our happiness and well-being. But how do we actually change what we worship?
It's definitely not easy,
Right.
but it starts with awareness.
Okay.
That first step is to
Mm.
simply notice what's capturing our attention,
Mm-hmm.
our energy, our time.
Yeah.
What are we constantly thinking about?
Right.
What are we most afraid of losing?
Mm-hmm.
And once we start to see those patterns,
Okay.
we can begin to question them.
Okay.
Are these things truly aligned with our values?
Mm-hmm.
Are they leading us toward a life of meaning and fulfillment?
It's like taking a look in the mirror and asking. Yeah.
Is this what I really want?
Exactly.
And sometimes the answer might be a bit uncomfortable.
It can be. But that discomfort is a sign of growth.
Yeah.
It's an invitation to examine our beliefs, our priorities, and to make conscious choices about how we want to live.
So it's not about like forcing ourselves to change overnight,
Right.
but this gradual process
Yeah.
of becoming aware and questioning and experimenting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this brings us back to Wallace's message about the true value of education.
Okay.
And it's not about memorizing facts or getting good grades.
Right.
It's about developing the mental tools to navigate the complexities of life with more awareness, compassion, and freedom.
It's like he's saying a real education is less about what we know
Yes.
and more about how we think.
Exactly. It's about cultivating the ability to think critically,
Okay.
to challenge assumptions, to see multiple perspectives, and to make choices that are aligned with our deepest values.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a skill set that's essential not just for college graduates.
Right. But for all of us.
Yeah, no matter where we are in life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes This Is Water such a timeless and powerful message.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we all have this capacity for awareness,
Mm-hmm.
for choice, for freedom.
Yeah.
And it's a call to action to cultivate those qualities, to wake up to the reality of our water, and to choose to live a life that's truly meaningful.
This has been an incredible journey, and I feel like I've gained so much
Me
from
too.
going through all of this with you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
Yeah.
And I really hope that the listeners, armed with these insights, will walk away with a renewed sense of agency
Yeah.
and a deeper understanding of the choices they make every single day.
And hopefully they can start to see the world through a different lens, this
Yeah.
lens of awareness, of compassion, and freedom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because as Rawls reminds us,
Mm.
this is water. This is water.